Learning about a person's genetic variant in the DMD gene starts with reading their test report. The genetic test report is the formal documentation of a person's variant, which in turn contributes to understanding their diagnosis, how to assess family members, and possibly even treatment options that can be considered. Although genetic test reports can look daunting because of their length and technical language, patients and families can look for key components of a test result to better understand their variant. The goal of this video is to provide an overview of how to explore a genetic test report. Before we dive in, every person deserves to have their own copy of their test report. If you don't have a copy of your or your child's test report yet, ask your healthcare providers for this. The result you receive should be a copy of the actual test report rather than a written summary of the report. The laboratory that performed the test can also help share the original. In this video, we'll talk about how to look for variant information on a lab report. However, reading a report is not the same as interpreting what the report means for a person's health. Your healthcare providers will use test report information along with many other pieces of information to discuss what the report means for you and your family. So ensure to consult your healthcare providers in reviewing your test report. What information can a report provide? What information can a report not provide? Indeed, genetic test reports can't tell us everything, but they do provide some essentials. For example, the test report will show the type of variant that was found, the exons involved, and for variants like deletions, whether it is in frame or out of frame. The laboratory does provide their interpretation as to whether they think a DMD variant could impact a person's health. However, knowing a person's variant doesn't tell us exactly what they will experience. Even two people with the exact same variant can experience a spectrum of symptoms. A lab report also cannot tell us whether a variant accounts for all of a person's symptoms. Healthcare providers help provide this information. Every laboratory uses its own format for genetic test reports, so they won't all look the same. But because genetic test reports are all trying to share similar information, you can often find the same type of content on test reports from different laboratories. For example, all test results will describe who received the test, the lab that performed the test, and what test was done, often with technical information about exactly how the test worked. Many test reports will have large font or bolded text on the front page to call attention to their overall findings. Did the test find a DMD variant or not? And for DMD variants that are found, the test will provide many pieces of information about the specific variant. Now, many lab reports will have variant information in more than one place. Sometimes part of it will be organized into a table. For others, it may be in paragraphs. Not all labs will organize information the same way, but the key terms will be the same. Let's use an example to walk through the basic information about a variant that each report is likely to contain. When a variant involves only one gene, the name of the gene will be listed. The dystrophin gene is named DMD. The laboratory will list exactly the variant that was identified as specifically as possible for the test that was performed. For some types of variants, it's often quite obvious what type of variant is present because the test will describe it in writing as a deletion or duplication and state which exons are involved. However, there are many types of variants that won't be described as simply as just deletion or duplication. And that's because many other variants need a technical language to describe exactly what the variant is and what it does. So, if a test report doesn't have any obvious writing about a deletion or duplication, look for a string of letters and numbers that starts with C dot. This phrase of letters and numbers is a language that signals where and what was found in the gene. For example, on this image, C.7792C to T, this means that 7,792 letters into the DMD exons, the lab expected to see a DNA letter C and found a T instead. The string of letters and numbers after the P dot describes what the variant does when the gene tries to make the dystrophin protein. On this image, the P.GLN 2598 star means that when building the dystrophin protein block by block with amino acids, at building block 2598, there should have been an amino acid called glutamine, but instead there was an early stop that caused the gene to stop building dystrophin too early in the gene. This technical variant language with the C dot and P dot can tell those with genetics training what type of variant is present. For example, this type of variant, where a building block is exchanged for an early stop, this is called a nonsense variant. Sometimes the lab will directly list this term and tell you exactly what it's called on the test report. Other times, a family may need a healthcare provider or scientist to help confirm what type of variant is present. Many types of variants will have something called zygosity listed, and you'll be able to find these words related to zygosity because they include the letter Z. Zygosity explains how many copies of the gene exist and how many contain the variant. Most people assigned male at birth have only one copy of the DMD gene, and this will lead their DMD variant to be called hemizygous. For people with two copies of the DMD gene, but only one copy that has a variant, their variant will be called heterozygous. This includes most carrier results for people assigned female at birth. One more key phrase that typically appears somewhere on every report is a variant classification. A variant classification is the lab's determination as to whether the variant can impact the function of the gene or potentially affect a person's health. If the lab has high confidence that a DMD variant can affect how the gene works, it will classify the variant as pathogenic or likely pathogenic. A variant being called pathogenic says that this variant can influence health, but it doesn't necessarily describe exactly how it will affect a person's health. So the word pathogenic all by itself doesn't tell us what condition or symptoms a person will have. Sometimes the lab finds a variant, but cannot tell for sure if it would impact a person's health. Because all humans are genetically different from each other, we all have unique variations in our genes, and many of those don't affect our health. So the lab tries to determine which variants may cause health problems, but sometimes they can't be sure what a variant is doing to the gene. When this happens, the variant classification is listed as uncertain or unknown significance. Over time, as science learns more about a variant of uncertain significance, it may go on to be reclassified either as pathogenic or potentially as harmless. It's important to talk to your healthcare provider about any uncertain variants on your test report to determine how to use this information. Scientists often know more information or have more information available about a variant that may not fit on the front page of a test report or in a table. So there is often a variant section or some section in the report that lists the facts that the lab used to decide how to classify the variant. These pieces of information do not usually have a direct meaning for a person's health, but they can shed light on the laboratory's reasoning for a certain variant classification. So far, we've looked at a pretend test report for one of the most common types of test formats, but you may get a test report that looks very different. For example, some labs prefer to describe all variant information in paragraphs rather than organized in tables or by bullet points. Look carefully, however, and usually all the same key terms will be found, including the variant description, the zygosity, and the classification. Some other reports look different because of the type of test that was performed. In the video so far, we've described a test report for a test called next generation sequencing, which is a relatively common type of test. But other testing types that can look at the DMD gene may have different report details. For example, reports for a genetic test called a chromosomal microarray will usually reference the location of the DMD gene on the X chromosome. So if you spot a string of letters and numbers that starts with XP on a microarray report, you can think of this as being similar to the C dot information from our previous examples that helps us understand where the variant is located. Testing technology and report formats change over time. So if you get a test report that you're not sure how to read, talk to your healthcare provider to learn more. In summary, even if a genetic test report looks intimidating, the essential information is usually findable if you know how to look for it. The test report is the proof of a person's exact DMD variant. So don't forget to obtain a copy of the report for your records and to work directly with your healthcare providers to confirm your understanding and determine what the report means for you and your family. When looking for support to review your test report, you could also consider working with a genetics clinician like a geneticist or a genetic counselor if you haven't met with one already. If you live in the USA or Canada, you can use findageneticcounselor.com to search for in-person or virtual options. Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy also has a lot of genetics education available online, and you're welcome to reach out to our team at coordinator@parentprojectmd.org with questions. We can't serve as your personal clinician, but we may be able to answer your questions or direct you to a healthcare provider who can. Let us know how we can support you.